Hey, this is Tiger. Welcome to my stream. Hey, good evening, the Spectre. Nice to see you. Long time no see. And AJ Black, good evening to you. Welcome to Starcross here, where you can get not only to the Great Western Railway services, but also for the Exmouth ferry, because this might look like the English Channel, but it is actually the estuary of the River Exe, namesake for Exeter and Exmouth. Not quite the English Channel. We have to go a bit more in this direction to get there. And why am I? Have a great stream, everyone, says AJ Black. Acura 94, more into you. Nice to have you back. Why am I taking you here? Why am I not starting to just run a train? Because today I want to talk about a railway technology that you do definitely not know, or do not need to know. No, you don't need to know anything about it. That's what I wanted to say. But that struck me when in the introduction to this route it was mentioned, and I had no idea what an atmospheric railway is, so I had to research it and find it out. And this interesting building here, an engine house that used to house a steam engine, is one of the remnants of Isambard Kingdom Brunel's so-called atmospheric caper, when he actually tried to build an atmospheric railway here between Exeter and Newton Abbot, and further on to Plymouth and Paington. It was actually in use, but not much longer than a year. Then it was abandoned again, and some of those engine houses are still here, modified obviously. Some of them have vanished, some of them only exist in little pieces. Penny, nice to see you. Inspector says crossing the tracks. Haha, tea and biscuit with the police. Well, I can do it. I'm just a ghost from the past going around here. And for ghosts from the past, it is obviously not a punishable offense to cross the tracks when showing people around. But well, before we do that, let's drive a bit around with a train. Let's go to main menu, and what I wanted to do today is to use the trains that are layering into the Riviera Line from the Great Western Express for what we are supposed to get a remaster anytime soon, maybe within the next weeks or months. The work in progress shots that they showed so far are quite promising, and maybe they polish the trains a bit. Also, because we're here with the Networker Turbo and the high-speed train from the Great Western Express. It is... By the way, can anyone tell me why it is Great Western G instead of Great Western E in the description here? Or Great Western R? My knowledge is not good enough to find it out. So we want to run a service from Paington to Exmouth. That means we are not going around the full circle around the Exe estuary, but we are stopping here in Exeter St Davids, so we are running more or less north, and then we would circle this estuary and go to Exmouth on the other side. But that is not in the route, obviously. We stop at Exeter St Davids. I actually enjoy those two trains a lot, that they are... Hey, CD Radar, I overlooked you almost. Nice to have you on the jet. How come that you're always have this light green color and others appear in different colors? Oh, is it already so late? 17:47. Let's see if we are getting already. I actually didn't want to have a service that is so late. Sorry. We can pick our colors, CD Radar. I did not know that. Some people obviously did not pick colors and they appear in different colors all the time. I wanted to have some sunshine. I have green, so it matched the sword. Ah, I see. Yeah, that makes sense. The moderator sword. So, next try. Choose route Riviera Line, timetable 166. And can we not have Paington, Exmouth, Paington? Then we go in the morning at 7:17 from Paington to Exeter St Davids. In October, well, I think it is. I should be light enough to do this. Yeah. Yes, that is enough light. So, unlock, neutral, check if the doors are okay here at Paington, and then we can open the doors. Safety systems, normal, DST, the vigilance is already at normal on this train, and then let's not forget this fuse, otherwise it won't work. The radio does not work. Signaler is here, we have a working DRA, that is good. Lights, maybe. Daylights. Yes. No, that works. We have tail lights. And this is where we are starting at the, well, southernmost station in the DLC. Then we're going to Newton Abbot. And then all the way back to Exeter St Davids. Paignton sounds like a nice place. Yes, Paington. I don't think it is associated with too much pain. Riviera holidays, anyone asks Spectre? Yes. Well, I have to say, this Riviera line is really a most enjoyable route. Sometimes it is real eye candy and it is comfort food for driving it. Ah, thank you, CD Radar. GWG is mentioned in Dovetail Games forums as a livery code for the Great Western Green. This is where the G comes from. And, well, this is the dark green that we have there. Going to Torquay. Stopping at Torquay. And we're actually going up a quite steep incline. What is one of the reasons why people in the 1840s thought that building this railway according to the principle of the atmospheric railway actually makes sense and could be effective? Because at least at the times, those were gradients that steam locomotives could hardly handle, if at all. Spectre says, I find it extremely cool that they chose British Racing Green as their train color. Is that the name for that color? British Racing Green. Well, Well, they're definitely not the ones for understatement, right? Calling your railway and announcing it on every train. You are on a great Western Railways train. And using it a color that is called the British Racing Green. Yeah. But I totally can imagine and see the racing cars in front of me. It is a dark green used back in time when the race car liveries were made due to the nationality of the team. Silver white for Germany and British Racing Green. Look at old Lotus and Jaguar race cars. Yeah, makes total sense. That's those racing cars that look a bit like cigars with 4 wheels and the driver popping out in the middle. So we're approaching Torquay. Line limit is 40 here and it does not drop for Torquay. Juniper, guten Abend to you, good evening. You made it in time to join us for the part on the atmospheric railway. You're complaining about expensive train tickets. Alright, my train does not want to stop.
24, Great Western Railway service to Exmouth, morning at Torre, Newton Abbot, Teignmouth, Dawlish, Barton, Starcross.
So I think everyone agrees that the station announcements and train announcements are a really great addition to Train Sim World. Especially if you don't really pay attention and it's just for ambience. Next up is Torre. And when we come back to our atmospheric railways and the engine houses along the track, it is an interesting fact to mention that the first engine house that we are encountering when we're coming from Paington and going uphill will be north of Torre. Not so easily found as in Starcross. Actually, we have to use our external cameras to see them. And Acura gifted a tier 1 sub to 2 followers. Thank you so much. And a gifted one to Spectre, great. Thank you so much, Acura, for your ongoing support for the channel. You gifted so much that it actually scrolled out of the picture that I can see on my phone. So, approaching Torre already, and it is not that I am going slowly because I chose so. It is actually the incline that slows us down. We have to slow down to 30 anyway. When coming into Torre station.
Great Western Railway service to Exmouth, morning at Newton Abbot, Teignmouth, Dawlish 1.
Those cannons are definitely one of the more interesting collectibles.
Exeter St Davids, Exeter Central, St James Park,
And they are actually reusable.
Digby and Sutton, Newport, Torre, Exton, Livingston.
Don't forget the holding brake here. Otherwise the train might roll backwards. And now let's see if we can actually spot the engine house for Torquay. That is sitting on top of the hill. And we will get back to this later, why it is sitting on the top of the hill. Because those engine houses were used to create the vacuum that sucked the trains along the tracks. And so it needed to be typically on the top of the hills to suck the trains up. And then downhill you can just have the train running by gravity and then hopefully slow it down. So when the engine house sits on this, well, hill or elevated part to the left, and if you want to look it up in Google Maps, you can aim for a Lidl's supermarket in, I think, Newton Road, north of Torre, where the railway track goes around this bend to the left that we are now approaching. And there you can find this Torquay engine house that ruled the whole branch here between Newton Abbot and is actually Newton Road crossing, I think. Now let's see if we can find it. Should be somewhere up here. Here you can see the chimney. This is the engine house. Easily missed when going on the train itself. But it is in the game, so they went to great lengths to include it. And as was to be predicted, now we're running downhill towards Newton Abbot. And this explains the strategic positioning of the engine house on the top of the hill. 60 is now the limit. And in the days of the atmospheric railway, we would just have the train gravitate downhill towards Newton Abbot. I think called Newton at the time. And slow it down with our brakes when we arrive there. Now we are about to join the line that comes from Plymouth. From the left. Now we always have to use the brakes a bit because gravity is taking us to Newton Abbot. Going to platform 3. That is, from our point of view, the leftmost. At the same time, sending us across the switches. Distance signal with a triangle on the signal identifier plate. So we have to take it easy when running into Newton Abbot. Never exactly know where the signal is. Since it is a distant signal, it's probably a home signal that is following. Can we not have some instrument lights? Ah, that was not the signal, it was the Morpeth board. That wants us to slow down to 40. Then there is a small drop in line speed from 60 to 55. Can I not have some lights here as a switch? Mustn't brake too hard if I want to gravitate into the station. Otherwise we won't make it across this little ridge. And we can see that the signal must have switched to green in the approach. And it is sending us across the line. Position 2. That means we're going across 2 switches that are rated with 40. And then we're on the main line. It comes from Plymouth. With a 60 limit. One, two. Now we are back on the up line. That comes from Plymouth and goes to Exeter. So, Newton Abbot.
Calling at Teignmouth, Dawlish, Dawlish Warren, Starcross, Marsh, Barton, Exeter St Thomas, Exeter St Davids, Exeter Central.
And while we're sitting here in Newton Abbot, I want to in my presentation about the atmospheric railway technology. That means I have it running, and let's see if it works. Yes, here we are. What is the atmospheric railway technology? Again, if you have no clue, you don't need it for playing the game at all, but it is mentioned in the route introduction. Isambard Kingdom Brunel and his atmospheric railway that happened on this route, this Riviera Line. And well, it is something unique and interesting in my opinion. Let's imagine you have a track, and typically you would pull along your trains with steam engine. It is about the mid of the 19th century, 1830, 1840, 1850, 1860, and you have steam engines pulling the cars. The problem with a steam engine is that the engine carries around its own power plant. The steam engine is a steam engine on wheels, so the payload ratio is actually not so great because we have to carry around that machine that creates the power, and we don't really get any benefit from carrying it around. The other thing is that steam engines at the time actually had a knack of exploding their boilers, what is an unpleasant thing if it happens close to you. So there is actually a benefit for putting the steam engines that create the steam and the power not on the wheels but somewhere next to the track. And if you can find an idea when creating the power not in the locomotive but line side, you get a better payload ratio and it is safer. More or less, this is what happened with the electric locomotives in the end. You don't have to have your diesel engine on your locomotive and produce the electricity to drive your diesel electric locomotives, but you produce the electric current trackside or have it fed there from substations, and payload ratio gets better. And well, the problems with exploding boilers, if the engine houses explode, then at least your passengers are not there. But how can you do this if you're not in a position to convert it into electricity and have electrified lines to do that? One idea that people came up with in the 1930s for the first time, I think, or even at the first idea was at 1800, to suck the train along the track by vacuum, by pressure differences in a pipe. You might, at least the older ones among us might remember those pneumatic pipe post systems in post office buildings or hospitals, where you can put your documents that you want to share with somebody in a different place in the building, put them into a capsule and feed them into a tube machine, and then you select where it is supposed to go, and then flip, this thing would run through this tube system and end up there. And they were driven with more pressure behind the capsule and less pressure in front of the capsule, and that's actually not a bad thing for trains to work upon. The downside is obviously if you want to put the whole trains in the tube, then you need quite a big tube, and it is difficult to seal it to make it airtight for working it properly. And it is also not a really great experience for the people on the train to live in a vacuum. So you had to insulate the trains that are running in those tubes. So this was actually never an option. Nice idea for subways though, but not really feasible. So what can you do? You don't put the whole train in the tube, but you put something that is connected with the train in the tube, and then pull this thing, a piston or whatever, a guide along the tube, and the train connected to it gets pulled by some sort of a connection, a rod or whatever, along with it. So actually they put a quite massive tube in the middle of the track to create pressure differences, like vacuum in front of the train and atmospheric pressure behind the train, and suck the train along by vacuum. And This is why you actually had those tubes running in the middle of the track. As you can already see, this tube is not a complete tube, but it has a slot, a longitudinal slot along on the top side. Why? Because we have to connect the train to it. And as you can easily see, this is already a vulnerable part of our vacuum in the tube, because it is prone to get not airtight anymore, and so the vacuum can vanish and the whole thing cannot work anymore. But let's see how this works then with a train. You have, if you look at it from the side, your rails, your sleeper, and then this massive tube in the middle. You put your train on it, couple together cars, typically with bogies but with single axles at the time, and you connect one of the cars with a rod that reaches into the tube, and then there in the tube there is a piston that gets moved by the vacuum. Let's look at this connection here a bit closer. This is our tube cut in the middle. You can see the wall of the tube up and down, and there is air in it. You can see this is the part where the vacuum is, this is the part where the atmospheric pressure is, and the difference in pressure. Put in a piston that more or less fills out the whole diameter of the tube on the inside, and let it connect with some rod. And then you can see vacuum in front of it, atmospheric pressure behind the piston, so that it actually runs smoothly and is as tight as possible be. You need some medium that make the piston glide like tallow. If you don't have any artificial lubricant, you have to put a big coat of some slimy substance into it that makes it tight on one side, and on the other hand makes the piston run. And then you connect this thingy that on the next end connects to the car. So you have the atmospheric pressure behind the piston, the near vacuum in front, and that creates a forward movement that sucks the piston along and through this gearing the train. This is why this car where the piston is attached to is the piston car. You would have a driver that has also the possibility to operate brakes on this train, and yeah, sometimes actually to do something with the piston and move it around or put it into a different rod or pipe or whatever, but mostly to slow down the train when there is a station and stop it with the brakes. Yeah, the next thing, obviously, you have to have an opening in your pipe so that this gearing can reach into it, but you have to close it so that you can create a vacuum. So you need some movable part that fills this gap in the pipe and have it open only in this part where the rod reaches into it for the train to be attached to the piston. And this can only be done if you have like segments of this valve, this longitudinal valve, actually, this part that closes this gap in the pipe. Like here, I made some segments that cover it here, and here they are lifted, they are moved out of this gap so that the rod can reach through, and here they are closed again. So where this rod reaches into it, this valve needs to open. Where it doesn't, especially in front of and around the piston, it needs to be closed so that the vacuum can be created. After the piston, so behind the piston, it actually needs to open so that the air can go in and create this difference in pressure, so that you have still the atmospheric pressure behind the piston and the artificially created vacuum in front of it. So this valve also serves to keep the pressure difference up, because the air can go in at this point and keep the atmospheric pressure behind the piston up. To open those thingies properly for the rod, there were contraptions or some technical drawings you can see that had some kind of wheels or rollers that would always move with the piston and lift up the valve so that the rod can go through, and afterwards it can fall back into position as soon as the rollers have passed. So actually quite a nice little contraption here. And the next thing that you want to have on your train, for example, or at least some trains had this, is some device that makes sure that the segments for the valve are closed again after this rod has passed. And this was often a copper tube that can be heated. And why do we want to heat that thing? It is not only the mechanical pressure that puts those segments back into the slot, it is also the heat that melts the wax between those thingies and the slits and where they fit in. You will put like a mixture of beeswax and other things that gets rigid as soon as there is a certain temperature, and then seals the valve shut. Then it is broken open by the rollers, the piston passes, this thing closes them again, and the heat, well, melts the wax a bit so that it can seal the valve again. So quite ingenious actually, this technology, if it actually was to work. And it worked in a way, but obviously you can see that this valve is the vulnerable part of the whole technology. Let's look at it from 90 degrees turned around, like this is the diameter of our pipe. Here in the middle we want to create the vacuum. Obviously we need to support it a bit to fix it to our track. This is the piston. Looked at it from the front and with that thingy that supports the piston more or less. And this is the part where the valve is there, so where you can close this little gap that you need to close so that you can create a vacuum, and that can be opened so that the piston and the rod can pass here. You would use an iron tube and a piece of iron to close it, and some sort of a mount again, and then you need to have some sort of a hinge. Today you would probably use rubber or some rubber similar plastic that has that is flexible so they can be moved around. But again, we are in the 1940s and 1930s, and there was no plastic that had that acted like rubber and so on. What did they use in this context? They used leather actually, so leather strips to mount this piece of iron to the mount here on the one side, and then put two pieces of iron, one smaller, one bigger, around the leather, so that this part is actually flexible and can be lifted and lowered again to seal this whole thingy here. And yeah, interesting. But leather is quite great, but it is not indestructible, especially if there is moisture. Then there are temperatures that are cold, that are hot, then the moisture can evaporate so that it can actually be too dry, and so it can break or rip or can deteriorate by weather and temperature influences alone. For that, to protect your leather slot valve, actually you had another thing. We come to that, and this contraption with this valve actually was built not by our Isambard Kingdom Brunel, but guys called Jacob and Joseph Samuda and a guy called Samuda and Clegg, and they had a patent actually for that. So they had it patented, and there is a treatise of this Joseph Samuda guy where we have interesting insights on what they actually thought, why they built it like this, and how they thought it should work. Here, this is the rod that connects the piston to the train. It is like thatched a bit so that this valve does not need to open too much, but only a bit, so that the rod can go through. And to protect this leather slot valve from weather and temperature, you would put another thing, piece of iron or steel, with an hinge now, with an iron hinge, what is called a weather flap that goes on top of the whole contraption to protect it from rain and ice and snow and temperature differences, or maybe animals or whatever can actually deteriorate this leather in the leather slot valve. From what we can hear, some implementations of atmospheric railways did not build this weather flap, actually, because it apparently made quite a din when the train was passing, especially at higher speeds, when this weather flap was moved away, for example, by rollers, again, that are mounted on the bottom of the train that can lift those weather flaps in segments, again, like a bit like the scales on a fish, so that if you lift one, the next one is lifted again, so that the whole train can move along. So in the South Devon implementation that we are here, they apparently had the weather flap, but in a different one, London Croydon, it is reported that this weather flap was missing, so that the leather slot valve was even more exposed to weather and temperature because of the din that those metal parts make when the train is running along. How fast were these trains actually going? Most of them were designed for speeds of about 30 or 45 miles per hour, so not super fast, but what people said from what you can read is that it was really smooth. The acceleration was really smooth as compared to the steam engines at the time that had quite a jerky start apparently. And here the movement started very, very smoothly and then accelerated to like 30, 40 miles per hour, and then at the next train, at the next station, the driver or conductor would stop the train by applying the brakes again. And yep. So there is a nice story that you can read if you read it about it. Is that apparently that there is one incident reported where a guy released the brakes on a piston car that was not connected to the train yet. So it was much lighter than it was supposed to be, and this thing really shot away and allegedly reached a speed of 65 miles per hour. About that. So if that actually was releasing the brakes by mistake, or if this guy could not resist pushing the red button with the caption "Do not push this red button," I don't know. But this shows that this thing can actually accelerate a thing like a train carriage quite quite smoothly and quite to really decent speeds. Yeah, but how do we actually get the vacuum created? And this is why we had those engine houses that I showed you in the intro to this stream. So like the one at Starcross here, and the other one on top of the hill. Typically on top of the hill, here you had steam engines, stationary steam engines that could be bigger, and it did not need to be carried around by the locomotive. And they created the vacuum in those engine houses, firing coal typically, and sucking by vacuum pumps the air out of those tubes. So the train would sit at the station before, and then someone would telegraph the engine house over there, and they would use their steam engines to create vacuum, and then there is enough vacuum, and then the train can start it here. The train would release the brakes, and then whoop, it would be sucked to the next station, where it would be stopped again with the brakes. Maybe even with intermediate stops, brakes, and then sucked along to the next engine house. And this shows nicely that you would want to have those engine houses on top of the hills. Then you can suck the train up hill, and then on the other side of the hill you can gravitate it down. Obviously you need more of those engine houses and in segments of your route, so that this can be done, and typically on the more elevated parts, so that you can suck the trains up from both ends. Safety thing is that you can always have only one train, that you cannot have trains running in opposite directions on the same piece of track, because you can only have the vacuum on one side of the piston. Also a safety thing at the time, without proper train protection systems, and even without proper signaling at this point, so head-on collisions could not really happen in a system like this. And again, you had a quite decent payload ratio, because the power plant is on the wayside and not on the moving part of the train, or not on your locomotive. What again gave this thing, or the system, an advantage when you had to navigate quite decent inclines and declines, right? Because you can only climb an incline up to a certain gradient with a locomotive that has to carry the power plant uphill. And if you don't have to carry the power plant uphill, have a better payload ratio, then you can navigate steeper gradients uphill. So that was actually quite alluring. Problem was that the thing with the longitudinal valve did not really work, because weather, winter, snow, ice, some say even rats, or some debris that came into the pipes deteriorated those valves too much, so that it did not really work, and was abandoned after, well, 1 year more or less. I think from 1847 to 1848 they had this on the South Devon Railway, and that was abandoned again and replaced by steam engine. And here, where we are running around on the Riviera Line between Exeter and Paignton, respectively Plymouth, this guy Isambard Kingdom Brunel, and the lead engineer for the Great Western Railway at the time, had this system implemented and built there. He did not invent this technology, that was more like Samuda and Clegg, but he brought it to the Great Western Railway, and had to suffer that it did not really work. So this guy Isambard Kingdom Brunel is it's a great figure if you look at pictures and what he did. So if you're a bit into steampunk and this stuff is alluring to you, as it is for me, so you have this flamboyant genius engineer guy building insane machines, like with steam and chains and metal rods and all this stuff, with wearing impossible high top hats and so this is just amazing. It's a different time, and it was just fun researching about it. By the way, at one time, by a BBC poll, this guy was called the second greatest Briton in history. So quite interesting, actually. And he built this atmospheric railway that did not work and was abandoned 1 year later. Some gimmicks that they also installed at some points: they had additional pipes next to the track when it came to points where you had to pull trains into the station that had to stop in front of the home signal, for example, and then couldn't go on anymore. And those pipes would run next to the track, had their own piston inside sticking out of the slot, and you would actually use ropes to tie your train to this piston so that the train could be carried around. Sometimes also to give the train a starting advantage until it got up to speed, to provide some additional traction. And then somehow you had to untie the rope again, otherwise it would not it would hold you back instead of accelerating you further. There were contraptions for level crossing, where you had some copper plates that were covering this pipe in the middle so that cars could pass safely without getting stuck on the pipe. And on the other hand, if they are in the open position, actually warding off and prohibiting the cars from running over. Interesting stuff from a time where you cannot watch old movies or stuff, where you have only very little, a little amount of pictures, photographs, and This is just amazing to dig into those things. At least it was for me. I hope it is not totally boring for you. It does not have to do anything with the game. But at least it was mentioned, and we have the engine houses in the game. By the way, engine houses, there are not so many still in existence. This is our route here from Exeter. This is Starcross, where we started, and Paington here, where we started our service that we took to Newton Abbot so far. And let's see where there are still some remains, or the engine houses themselves. One is Torre. Still at the estuary here. In real life, there are actually some foundations left in this field where the cows are strolling around. In the game, I have taken these pictures. All the pictures here are from the game. It looks really great, doesn't it? And this pond belonged to the engine house, because if you have a steam engine, you need water. This is why you have your tender on your steam engines. You need a lot of water, and if you watched the Thomas and Friends episodes, they are often calling for water on their travels, and if they run out of the water, they have to stop. So you need a lot of water to run your steam engines, and this was the supply here. So the water supply pond is still there. In real life, there are also some foundations, but in the game, from what I've seen, there are no foundations, but the place is here. Turf. Starcross is where we started our stream. Very prominent, very close to the station, so that you can hardly miss it. It is a bit in the way if you're approaching from the south, so that you have to whistle or use your horn, because you cannot really look around when you're entering the station. This is Dawlish, and here we can see in the game a wall, and this wall is a bit more not so plain, or not as plain as it is in the game in real life, but it is still here at the car park for Dawlish station. And this is, from what I have learned or probably found out, part of the engine house that was at Dawlish. In Torquay, that is the one that I showed you when we started our service from Paington to Newton Abbot, sitting on the top of the hill. Here, this corner here will be the Lidl supermarket, and here is a parking for the supermarket where you can look at it. So in Google Street View, you can totally find it if you're looking for it. It looks not as slender as it is here. It's a bit more massive, the chimney for it. And interestingly enough, it was never used, because the trains that actually run for this year between Exeter and Newton Abbot, only on this part, Exeter to Newton Abbot, it was planned that they can run on. This is why they built those engine houses for it. But since they had those problems over the winter of 47, 48, and abandoned it, so they were built but never used south of Newton Abbot. In Totnes, we find one of the best preserved engine houses. That is also a listed building, from what you can read. It was also never used as an engine house, used for different things. There's a round chimney here in the game, as well as in real life. And those are the 5 engine houses, or remains of it, that are still actually there in real life. And nicely enough, they were also implemented in the game. Not survived have the engine houses in Exeter St Davids, the one in Countsware, one at Teignmouth, Summer House, and the one at Newton. You can see you always have like segments of track, then your engine house, and the train needs to be sucked along the line from here to there. Paignton, there was one that was never used and does not exist anymore, and Rattery was not even completed, because at this time the whole project was cancelled and the planned houses up to Plymouth were no longer built. Some people say that the fact that this line has so many quite steep gradients in its route are testament to the fact that at the time of planning they already thought of atmospheric technology to get the trains along. Yeah, what happened to the technology? Was this just something that happened in 1840 and then disappeared? Well, not quite. So our South Devon Railway, what we are running around at the moment, Brunel and his caper, happened in 1847 to 1848, if I'm not mistaken. There were some more railways, like in Ireland, the Torquay atmospheric railway at Dublin, that actually was worked much longer and started earlier. So in 1840 or something, and everyone who wanted to build their own atmospheric railway looked at the one at Torquay, but it was definitely a much shorter line in Paris, connecting Saint-Germain, Paris and Saint-Germain. So it's not the football club, obviously, but this line, Paris to Paris Saint-Germain, was connected by an atmospheric railway that operated up until the 1860s, I think. And London Croydon Railway tried to operate one line or one track with atmospheric technology. That was the one that did not use this weather flap because of the din, apparently, at high speeds, and this destroyed their valves, their longitudinal valves, quite badly. So, and now we are more or less closer to the present. Do we have working atmospheric railways in the world? Well, we had one in 1989 to 2010 in Jakarta, in Indonesia. A Brazilian company marketing the Aeromovel technology, and they had a train running a couple of miles connecting Jakarta in some recreational district or something, but it was stopped in 2010 and replaced by whatever, diesel trains or whatever. So this existed but was stopped, but in existence, and I think it is the only one in existence actually, is that there is a little line at Porto Alegre with the same Aeromovel technology that since 2013 operates some metro style airport connector line of, I think it's only like a kilometer or a mile or something around that, and this operates with two vehicles being pulled with vacuum power and atmospheric power, and with a rod reaching into the pipe, rubber flaps for this longitudinal valves, so quite close to the technology that we are talking about, but really only a very, very small line. Another one is supposed to be built, Aeromovel, at Guarulhos airport in Sao Paulo. APM always means automatic people mover, because you don't have a driver anymore, so you would stop those trains automatically, so driverless vehicles. And this segment would be a bit longer, like I think 3 kilometers or something like this. And I've tried to find out whether they actually have it in service now, because in many sources it says that it was supposed to open in August or September 2025. But if you research it a bit, you find articles that the consortium building this thing said, well, yeah, we don't have it working yet, and we can't tell you when it will be working. We are waiting somebody to tell us that our technology actually works, and so it is not working. So this is the one at Porto Alegre, is the only one in existence. Then there was a project in Accra in Ghana, where they wanted to build a really big network of 200 kilometers or more with Aeromovel technology, but well, it got stuck during the pandemic, and afterwards it was abandoned. The SkyTrain in Accra, unfortunately not. This would be like a project worth of the steampunk romantic of Isambard Kingdom Brunel. And then another project that was abandoned recently is the Flight Rail Corporation, the Vector high-speed project. They were actually building a high-speed train that runs on elevated tracks with atmospheric technology, with vacuum created in front of the train, with pressure behind the train, even more sophisticated than the old technology, so no rod reaching into the pipe, but more or less a magnet running inside the tube, and a strong magnet, and the train is connected with a magnetic power with this thing that runs in the tube, so that you actually do not have any mechanical part reaching into the tube, and so you don't need a valve to seal this tube off. It was developed, this project, by a guy called Schlinger, I think, who was an aviation or whatever engineer, and at the time when you see him in some videos that you can find on this Flight Rail Corp website, he was about 89 years old, and he died recently, and since then the project is called abandoned. So if you have some spare cash and want to revive this project, maybe this is something for you. So he built in his vineyard in California an 1-to-6 model train that actually worked with this technology and runs around there, and you can see videos, can find videos on YouTube. So super interesting. Train was supposed to run 200 miles per hour, so really high speed. No connection into the tube, magnetic coupling, and they also had a concept for slowing down the train by changing the pressure ratio. So that was also atmospheric braking that was discussed with this train. Technology that is more or less dead, non-existing, but we are on the track where this once was in use in the winter of 1847, 1848, and abandoned afterwards. And this is what we have the remnants in the game of. That was my presentation for today. Thank you so much. I hope I did not bore you out of your skulls with it. It does not really have to do anything with what is happening in the game, but nevertheless I always find it interesting to look a bit outside of the box. And yeah, I had to research it after it was mentioned in the introduction, and I had no idea who Isambard Kingdom Brunel was and what atmospheric railways are. Now I know at least a bit about it, and I thought it is worth having a stream about. Now let's take home our train. Oh shit, sorry that people, I did not see that the chat was active. Now I can go back to the chat, and Spectre says, I'm sure you will explain that in detail by Tiger, but I have the impression that it is quite a task to keep a vacuum such a complicated system. Brunel sometimes thought outside the box, right? Yeah, well, I hope I managed to show you that as I'm here. Fuse as Evan Vor, hey, great to see you. Sorry for not saying hello earlier. In CD Radar, this would make a great safety system, but only one train can have vacuum and no can have. Yes, but this is also disadvantage that you can only have one train in a section. Definitely, totally. And then Acura, I'll not dishonor this gentleman, but the system is always way too expensive in building, maintain, and operate. Actually, they had the problem that the engine houses used much more coal than they calculated, so it was super expensive to maintain and operate, and yeah, obviously it limits you in many ways. CD radar, I can only imagine how incredibly unreliable this must have been, and yes, that is the problem. It was incredibly unreliable. So the question is, can you make it work with modern ways? Acura, no switches possible as well. Yeah, you had to have these extra tubes to get them around. Spectre, how did they do neutral sections when the train passes an engine house, because there has to be a vacuum before the yeah, this is actually a thing that was described. They had special valves that sealed off the one section and have the next section start. So I left that away, but this is something that is documented, how these transition valves were built. And Josh 182, hey, see you. Hey, Mr. Tigerway, it's good to see you. Hope you're well. Thank you. I hope you're well as well. And super nice to see you on my chat. Sorry that I did not come to you earlier, but it was somehow paused on my phone. And now let's take our train to Teignmouth. Well, I guess sometimes you have to try stuff to see if it works. And to be fair, the idea of putting your power supply outside of your vehicles survived with the electric traction. Yours, no problem. Are you enjoying the Riviera Line? I love it. I really love it. Now that I managed to get it run rather smoothly, it is really, 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 really nice to run this line. The trains are nice, the sounds are astounding, the scenery is great. So Spectre put something long in the track. In the chat, sorry. I will read it as soon as I've managed to stop the train at Teignmouth. By the way, again to the right, this is not the sea, but it is the Tyne estuary here. River Tyne. So what's my favorite train to run on this route? Well, I think the 802. I really like running this train. Inspector says, by the way, I have been to Guarulhos a few weeks ago and I have seen the tracks. But then you can actually say, or confirm that it is not working yet. Here's an 802 coming up.
For the 0743 Great Western Railway service to Exmouth.
And some vehicles, I think there only exist 3 of them, right? 2 that run and 1 that is as a spare. Not in motion, so not sure if it is operational already. Did not know it was atmospheric though. Yeah, cool. That is super cool. Well, that is working at Guarulhos Airport anyway. Sorry for being sarcastic. A nice choice, this yours. I really enjoy your content and how you point out local landmarks and rivers. Really informative. Thank you so much. I am so happy that you guys can appreciate that. I think everything gains so much more if you look at the context and not only like new train, new route, and then where is the next one? Yeah. What is working at Guarulhos? I wouldn't know. I've never been to Brazil. But I can see a pattern there, Spectre. The other day you showed us that you can understand Portuguese, and now you've been to Guarulhos. Is that the diesel electric? The yeah, this is all the 802 is diesel electric. It is the diesel Azuma, more or less, the 802. Same A train, but with a full-blown diesel power. The train I'm on, the Networker Turbo, is a diesel hydraulic train, if I'm not mistaken. And this is now actually really the English channel. Yeah, the English channel. The Teignmouth sign. Right, I have some extended family in Brazil. Has become very expensive to go there though. Yeah, oh, I can imagine. But it's cool. Everything that is international is cool. Especially in a world and era where everything is first again. Dawlish, I'm supposed to stop. Oh, yeah, like your stream, it is international and it is cool. Thank you, CD Radar. That is the biggest compliment that you can make, actually. I know I'm a bit old-fashioned in this context, but I still believe in this one world approach, more or less. And that isolationism and selfishness can only make things worse. Dawlish, ladies and gentlemen, Dawlish. And here you can see it from the train, actually. This wall here to the left at the car park is the wall that belonged to the Dawlish engine house, if I'm not mistaken.
Holslow Bridge, Digby and Soughton, Newport, Topsham, Exton, Limston Commando, Limston Village, and
So, here's a tough one, says Joris. What's your favorite route in Train Sim World? That is really a tough one. There are some routes that I always like coming back to. Obviously, my first route that impressed me so much that I dug into this game as much as I did is Sandpatch Grade. I really love it. I have not touched it in quite some time. I think I don't have it at the moment in my Steam installation. Have to wait for my installation to be replenished again. But look at this, how the sea looks, right? The waves, how they are rolling in. It depends a bit on the lighting and the angle, but here it really looks great in my opinion. In Germany, obviously the Dresden-Riesa route has always been a favorite because it is so versatile, but emotionally I think my most beloved route is Ruhrsieg Nord, sometimes treated as some kind of a, well, Geheimtipp. An oldish one, but great route. I like the Semmeringbahn very much in Austria. A route that is really great is the Preston Carlisle route. The Just Trains route altogether, also the Blackpool branches are really cool, and I'm looking forward to more from Just Trains. But I think I can name you like 10 more routes that I'm really happy when I always visit them again. Yeah, am able to visit them again. So this was an approach control signal. We had to slow down because we are going into Dawlish Warren siding. Don't actually know with 45. Here's a limit, a temporary speed restriction announced to 40. And Joris, I've never seen or played the Sandpatch Grade since I only started playing Train Sim World 5 last year. Yeah, that's the thing. It is maybe the first Train Sim World route ever. Was a core route in Train Sim World 2. And the first route that I ever touched. Some people find it extremely boring because, well, you run up Sandpatch Grade and down Sandpatch Grade. And that's it. With the old American diesels, but nevertheless, you can learn how to handle your brakes on the descent. Oh, that was a heavy start of the rain. Oh, maybe I should open the doors. That was like someone really spilled a bucket on top of us where this rain came from. So Dawlish Warren is the one where you have the carnival with a Ferris wheel and this moving ship and this go-kart track. The pirate ship. So now I'm dawdling a bit. Yeah, it looks cool at night, Jers. Oh. One thing that you can see that this train is really old is that the keys for the AWS and the Vigilance DSD are not separated. So AWS and DSD is the same key that you also use for the CIFA and not the Q key. Still have to be slow because we're going out of the siding. We're actually stopping at Starcross. Well, and they've come a long way with the water animation. If you look at this water and what the sea looks like, and if you compare it to what the English Channel in the Isle of Wight DLC by Rivet, that I actually like, but the water animation I don't like at all. And Joris is interested to see some more London Underground routes. Yeah, as well. Me as well. And Nakura says this route does really look nice. I think I'll get it. But for just $10 more, there is the standard edition with more content. I'm not interested in. Oh, so you're not interested in the other content. Oh no, did I miss? Yeah, see, those are actually those temporary speed restrictions that you don't see because the signs are missing. And because we don't get a repeater sign after stopping at the platform. Typically, if you get the announcement sign for the temporary speed restriction and you have to stop before you actually reach the beginning of the speed restriction, you're supposed to get a second warning sign for the speed restriction together with a yellow sign with an R on it, a repeater sign, in case you forget while you are sitting at the station. And this is just what happened to me while I was showing off the carnival. I forgot, and then they forgot the signs, and this is why we didn't get points. And here's our engine house at Starcross. Where we started before the rain came. So, Joris, here's a question. In the UK, we have those whistleboards. Do German routes have whistleboards? Yes, so-called Pfeiftafeln. It shows a P, a black P on white ground, but we only have this on secondary lines typically because they are only for level crossings that are not secured in a technical way. And now I want to see what CD Radar wrote. He says, but I can totally see that even if they make a new tube line, it would be Piccadilly with old trains, no communication-based train control and boring deep tunnels. Maybe. Why is the wiper so high? Half of your field of vision is not wiped. Yeah, this was... I was wondering this too. I didn't want to mention it, but actually you cannot really see in front of your train because the field of vision is not really wiped. Akura says, we do have 5 tavern. Yes, that is true. And Joe says, interesting, thanks. Actually, typically on one of the stations where I have to wait for my train, I can see one of those 5 tavern because there is a branch line that used to lead to some industrial complex. Starts with a level crossing that is not technically secured, and there you can see a 5 tafel. But you would rather not encounter them on primary lines. Only on secondary railways and branch lines. There is a video, I think, about the Niedertalbahn, where those 5 tafel and the level crossings are discussed. Like 2 years ago when the Niedertalbahn came out, we did that. Or even 3. Time flies. So we have to stop at Marsh, Barton. So I picked a service that actually stops a lot. Yes, and CD Radar has the link for the video about the 5 tafel. Thank you so much. This train can actually go 90 miles, by the way. What is a nice difference to the Sprinter that can only go 75. So in parts of this line here you can go up to the 90 with this train and not with the Sprinter. So if our engines could do it, we could actually accelerate beyond the 80 here in this 100 limit. Now we're getting closer to the site where the turf engine house used to be, and where we can still see this rectangular pond for the water supply. So, rain is almost stopped, but not completely. Here, this is our pond. To the right. And here in this field, you would have those foundations sitting around and being caressed by the grazing cows. It says on Wikipedia that the engine house and the bricks that the engine house was made of were used to build a nearby farm, or to expand it or fix it or whatever they did on that farm. Rain has not stopped completely, right? I can go to coasting because we're getting closer to Marsh. Barton, what is a rather recent addition to the line. Exeter St Davids and Exeter St Thomas are as old as the line, like almost 200 years. But Marsh Barton is much younger. I'm always hitting my Q key with precision and then nothing happens. No, Spectre, I have not checked out the clay train services with the 66th. I checked out just this afternoon the 66 services, but then I realized that I only have a very limited amount of 66s in my Steam installation, and I wanted to wait until I can use more recent versions of the 66 for that. Next time I fly trains in the world, I will try one of them, he says. And the ultrasonic testing train with the 37. Yeah, the 37 is also one that I'm missing in this installation yet. So I have to see to get my Steam installation on up to date. This is Marsh Barton. This is not the station building here. And it says on some sign that Marsh Barton here is the gateway to the Riverside Valley Park. Yeah, with this thing. Oh, ISRTU, hello there, nice to see you. Yeah, I'm hanging in there a bit because I have to play on the Steam installation, because on the Epic Game Store version so many DLCs are not transferred at the moment, and the Steam installation are missing different DLCs. Huh. Are you gonna stream for a while more? I will take a break soonish, but I plan on coming back then with a second leg. But we are about to arrive at Exeter in like 10 minutes. Then I will take a break, and then I come back with a run from Exeter to Plymouth on the high-speed train. Oops. At least this is the plan. High-speed train, Voyager, the HST. The old one, not the Voyager, but the old one from the Great Western Express. Fun fact, concerning the atmospheric railway technology, Exeter St Thomas was one of the stations, or maybe the only station, that did not have its own engine house. So trains starting in Exeter would be pulled by the Countess Weir engine house. and then had to be stopped on brakes in Exeter St Thomas, held there, and under vacuum pressure, so to say, before they could go on. HST is cool, says Spectre. Most original name ever. Yeah, well, in German it would probably Hochgeschwindigkeitsschienenfahrzeugverbund. Verbrennermotoren getrieben. Yeah, that's probably what we would say. Well, Spectre, we had Schnellzuglokomotiven as well, so... Good thing, I should have set my DRA, by the way, because we stopped at a red light. Now we are at a yellow one. Yes, HST versus TGV. They both mean the same, that's true. Inspector says so the IC should be basically be HGZ, Hochgeschwindigkeitszug, rather than ICE. Maybe. The problem is, if you use that word once and you have a train that is even faster, then you're running out of superlatives at some point. You have a high-speed train, you have a higher speed train, you have a highest speed train, and then you have a really high-speed train. Oh shit. Yeah, well, I know it is approach controlled, but still. You should not count on it. We're switching over to the right line because the train is... No, the train is not going back. We want probably to be on this 15 miles line. Train is going on to Exmouth, so we're not going back. Now, yes, RTUs, I don't understand whatever you said. I don't speak Deutsch. Yeah, the Hochgeschwindigkeitszug is more or less... Oh, we're not going to the 15 one. Hochgeschwindigkeitszug is the German translation for high-speed train. When will I finally get a job as a brand manager at Deutsche Bahn, Inspector? Well, maybe as soon as you apply. That's one hell of a word. Hochgeschwindigkeitszug. I wonder what this would be in Polish or Czech. Rychlost is speed in Czech, I think.
Great Western Railway service to Exmouth. Calling at
Now that I think of it, is LZB DE any different from LZB España? I think there are some differences. City Radar, what is high-speed train in Czech? Here, I missed my temporary speed restriction. All the rest was good. So, That was our caper, our atmospheric caper into Isambard Kingdom Brunel's atmospheric railway implementation on the South Devon Railway. We did not go on a atmospheric train, obviously, but on this Networker Turbo from the Great Western Railway in Great Western green, British Racing green livery, class 166. Hey. Vysokorýchlostný vlak. Inspector says, oh, rem da alta velocidade in Portuguese. There is the rýchlostný. Vysoko, vysoki is tall, right? I remember that now. Und vlak is the train in Czech. In Polish, train is pociąg, right? And what is speed in Polish? Or something with the rýchlost thing. Well, guys, we will probably find that out. We have also been in Spain since 1978. Yeah, I guess this is about the same implementation time that we started having it in Germany. It is quite close from the technology, but I think the trains interpret it a bit differently. But we will look into it. Let's have a Spanish route in Train Sim World, and we will look into this definitely. Guys, as I said, that was the caper in the atmospheric railway technology. I hope you enjoyed it a bit, because, well, it was not really something that you need to run the Riviera Line, but I enjoyed it a lot, digging into it. I hope I did not bore you too much. And as I said, I will take a break now and will be back in maybe half an hour to run a high-speed train from here, from Exeter St Davids to Plymouth. It will be a quite silent stream. I obviously will talk to you if you want to talk to me on the chat, but there will be no presentation or nothing. I will just drive this train and wheel down a bit. Thank you so much for your ongoing support. ISR uses the Siemens Velaro A with LZB. Not big difference with that train. We will look into it actually how it is. No, I will have my microphone on and I will talk to you definitely, but if I fall silent for a bit, then there is no problem either. Chuck, and now this train is getting to be taken out of the map by the ghost driver, I'm afraid. Or not. Or is it going into the opposite direction again? I thought this was... Oh, they are boarding the... They are jumping out of the train through the closed doors in the middle of the track. And here's the driver, so this train will go back to Exmouth. Apparently. Apparently we are not going out on this side, but on the other. Okay, so probably this train is turning around here to go to Exmouth. Oh no. Cool, see you in a bit, Spectre. QA at the fine as well, passengers. And if you are actually sitting in the second-man seat of the train that just has been taken over by IA, it's probably a difficult thing to handle. So, okay, as I said, pause, see you in about half an hour, 10:15 in Central European time, if you want. Juris, catch you in a bit, Mr. Tigways, catch you in a bit, Mr. Juris. Bye-bye.